Parshas Re'eh, Tavshin Ayin Gimel. We have a special schus to do the Shiur this week. As you see behind me, Kever. You have the depressing part of it too, the concrete security barriers. I feel like we're a little bit in a jail here, like by Bilam, Gader Mizeh, Gader Mizeh. But Baruch Hashem, we're able to come here, to daven, to be here, and we'll bring you the Shiur this week from Kever in Beit Lechem. The pasuk says in this week's parsha, perfect pasuk actually to talk about here at Kever. The pasuk says, "Banim atem lashem alekeichem." HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Klal Yisrael that you are my children, and we know the reading of this pasuk invariably takes place. It comes out on Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Elul. As unbelievable as it sounds, and where has the time gone? We don't know. We had so many Kabbalahs, so many things we wanted to do this year, right? But this week we're coming to Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Elul, and the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Elul, we always read Banim Atem Lashem Alekeichem, and it's just when the sparks of Elul are coming in and our preparations begin for Elul, that is when we say this pasuk. As we all know, very famous. We know this since we're children, right? The Rashi Tevis of the word Elul, Ani l'doidi, v'doidi li. It shows the special, close relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when Elul comes around, we're beginning to look. Everybody looks at their own individual matzav, and you understand everybody knows where they have to start thinking and what they have to start doing for Elul. And it comes this time of the year, and we put the emphasis on tshuva. And it's right at this Shara Tshuva where we begin thinking about Elul that a Yid has to remember Ani l'doidi v'doidi li, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close to us, and we always want to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when we remember this, we also want to remember what we say in this week's Parsha of Banim Atem Lashem Alekeichem, that you are HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, you are our children. We want to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Hashem tells us right before Rosh Chodesh Elul every year in this week's Parsha, Banim Atem Lashem Alekeichem. And this is the way to begin doing tshuva, not in a depressing way, not in a down way. We remember to do tshuva in this close way, when we are close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Nesivos Shalom brings the mimer of the Chenobla, Zechusa Yogan Aleinu, very famous. The Nesivos Shalom brings it down many times, that a Yid who does not believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be mekabel his regrets and his sigh that he gives when he starts thinking about what he did this year, a Yid who does not believe that is sort of called, also goes into the gather of an apikaris. If you don't believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there for you at all times, you're missing one of the fundamental beliefs that a Jew has to have. A Yid has to know no matter where he or she is in life, no matter where you are, the doors on the way back are always open. The doors are there. They're completely open to us, to a quick and fast track back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And why? Because of the pasuk in this week's Parsha. Banim atem Hashem alekeichem. No matter where a son is, no matter where a child is, we all know a child always has that open door. A child always has a way back, and it's something we always have to remember. So the Torah is teaching us this lesson every single year, right before Rosh Chodesh Elul, that to do tshuva, you need to remember this. Banim atem Lashem Alekeichem. And the words that follow in the pasuk, right after Banim atem Hashem Alekeichem, those words show us too. The pasuk says, Banim atem Hashem Alekeichem, lo yisis goidedu, right? V'lo yisimu karcha beineinechem. A person shouldn't tear their flesh. A person shouldn't scratch themselves or do those kind of things, because when does a person do that? A person only does that when a person loses hope. And if they don't lose hope, a Yid has to know that you never lose hope. So with pasuk tells us, Banim atem Hashem alekeichem, no matter what your matzav is, then loisis goidedu, you should not tear your flesh, because that is meant for people who give up hope. A Yid, a Jew, always has hope. A Yid is never in a matzav of yish. A Yid is always called a ben. And the Nesivos Shalom brings from a previous Slonim Rebbe that the pasuk in Mishlei tells us, Musar Hashem b'ni al timas. Now there is a literal translation of the pasuk, But the Nesivos Shalom gives us a beautiful, beautiful translation of this pasuk. The pasuk says, Musar Hashem B'ni. The musar that Hashem gives us is to tell us, B'ni, you are my son. You're a Ben Melech. Don't mess it up. Al timas. Don't do something, don't do anything that does not befit a Ben of a Melech. That's Musar Hashem B'ni. You're my son. Al timas. Don't do anything which doesn't befit royalty. Don't do anything that doesn't befit a son. The Torah tells us, it reminds us of that responsibility. We have a responsibility of being a child and acting like a child of a king does. We can't mess that up. On the other hand, right after that, right after Banim Atem Hashem Lekechem, the Torah tells us, Lois is going to do. That yes, you have an obligation to act as a son to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if you don't, if some, and most people do, if you fall, if you mess it up a little bit, Lois is going to do. No being depressed about it. No matzav of yish. You have to always know, like the Rambam says, we've said many times, and we'll talk about it in the next few weeks about tshuva. The Rambam says in Hilchas Tshuva, I'll read it to you. If emesh haya zeh muvdo me Hashem, if yesterday a person was separated from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, me Hashem alekei Yisrael, now when a person does tshuva, hayoim hu dovuk boy. The next day after you do tshuva, you could already be that much, you could be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So yes, the demands on us are great. We have to try our best to always be mekayim v'yohavtas Hashem alekecha b'chol avavecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol miyadecha. We need to do all of that, but we also need to remember that we read this every year right before Rosh Chodesh Elul to tell us that if we fall and we're not always the best and we're not always mekayim that, and there are so many shortcomings that we have, and every one of us has that. If you get to that matziv, the tachlis is to remember that at Elul always, ani l'doidi v'doidi li. Bonim atem Hashem alekechem. Rachel, who better than Rachel Imenu to teach us? Kol barama nishma. Rachel Imenu is always Rachel Imenu mavaka al boneha. Rachel Imenu is crying for her children. Bonim, we are her children. Rachel Imenu never forgets about us. That is why we come here, and we come here to daven, because Rachel Imenu is one who never stops crying for us. When somebody's in Eretz Yisrael, when one is in Eretz Yisrael, obviously the haftarahs of these weeks, the haftarahs that we learn, the Shivat and the Chemta, come very, very much alive. And we could visualize the words of the Navi. We look around Yerushalayim, we look around Beit Lechem, and the Navi talks so much about hope and the future and what the future of Yerushalayim is going to look like. We see the predictions and the nevuos, we see it all coming alive in front of us today. But of course, there's much more that we can do. The pasuk says in this week's Haftarah, we know the pasuk says, and and some of the sounds of Eretz Yisrael behind us. The pasuk tells us, "V'chol bonayich limudei Hashem," and however you want to translate it, that there are so many people that are going to learn Torah. There are so many people that are going to teach Torah. V'chol bonayich limudei Hashem. There's so much Torah in the world today, but sometimes people forget the end of that pasuk in this week's Haftarah. V'chol bonayich limudei Hashem v'rav shalom bonayach. The Nisayan of today is not so much Torah. It's not so much Chesed. It's the V'rav Shalom Banayach. Somebody looks a little different than you. He acts a little different than you. He lives in a different place than you. He doesn't have the same exactly Shitas, Hashkafas, this. We're ready to write everybody off. But in order to get back here, if we want to daven, if we want Rachel Imenu to cry for us, we have to pay attention to the pasuk in this week's Haftarah. Yes, V'chol Banayach Limudei Hashem. There's lots of Torah. We have to learn a lot of Torah. We have to teach a lot of Torah. But V'rav Shalom Banayach. We have to know that it's not going to happen until we all get along, until we realize, put aside our differences, and there's shalom, the ultimate bracha, there's shalom amongst all of Klal Yisrael. Let's take a hope that Rachel Imenu cries for us, and that our hopes of shalom and our learning Torah should be a schus for us, that this Chodesh Elul we should be zoichet to emes tshuva, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should accept that tshuva and bring us all back together here to Eretz Yisrael.